Saying it's always great to be back at school. I would love to, do these sessions and come to the school and meet the class in person physically. But so is the COVID world and the new normal. So happy to meet you all virtually, both the Mohali and the Hyderabad campus. At our time, there was only Hyderabad, but it's great to see the school doing well and welcome class of 2020. Uh, Let me start by saying, uh, you know, other than the fact that you'll be remembered as somewhat entering into 2020, which is a year, the world is not going to forget that easy. Uh, it's it is, I would say especially phenomenal to secure a place at ISB these days. At our time the competition wasn't much. I know because now I interview people for letting people or for admissions. It's an absolutely amazing bunch of people who apply, and the fact that you guys have got through, you should be super proud of yourself. I would say that uh, in the long run and hopefully even in the short run, despite the COVID issues, this would be an exciting journey for you and a rewarding one. So on that note, on behalf of the school, I once again welcome you guys, welcome the class of 2021, and good luck. When Prashanti called me to speak to you guys, it's always easier to do this in person where you do a little bit of a fireside chat and I would say speak more openly about issues, things to do, things not to do, and hopefully in 20 minutes or half an hour from now, we'll dive into Q&A, and I would love to hear anything I can help you with. But when I was thinking through earlier this morning on what could be a good time to, or what's a good way to spend this time for you guys, there are probably two topics I thought. One, now been at the firm at something called Blackstone for 10 years, which does private equity. And that as a business is somewhat not well understood. So a lot of you may have come across this, but many of you may not have. At least I was the one who was absolutely unaware about it when I entered ISP. So I thought I'd spend probably 5-10 minutes on what private equity is so that in this evening you at least get some content out of it. And the second topic I was thinking maybe as an outside in, again, perspective, I've been working now in corporate settings for 18 years between Hindustan Lever, which was hardcore operations, sales, running factories, doing what a lot of you may have already been brainwashed into, called management consulting for 3 years. And then for the last 10 years, I'm doing investing. So I just thought I'll take probably 5 or 10 minutes to talk about what does it really take to do well. And I by no means I'm trying to say that I've done well and I'm trying to replicate my experience, but I would say I've seen lots and lots of great people, phenomenal leaders, people who have built, executed, grown businesses and have grown people, with them. There are a few things I've learned from them, and I thought I'll just codify that for you guys, and I'll try to contextualize on how you can probably use that 1 year ahead of you at the business school at ISB to start to see, kind of do a pilot, little bit of that pilot on what those few traits are. So those are the two topics. If the the group feels okay, I'll probably use, and uh, I just put together a few slides. Always easy to anchor minds on piece of paper than a face, especially if you have one which is not so good looking. So that's the reason you have what I would say two sections to this document. What's private equity and breaking through the ceiling. Now this breaking through the ceiling, in full confession, it's a bit of a sensational word because I was told that you'll have 500 plus people, and if you need to hold their attention, you have to grab them in the first few minutes. And I was just thinking maybe I'll just say, some experiences, some learning, but that wouldn't have got the eyeballs, which probably this title will, which is called Breaking the Ceiling. So, but that's essentially talking about what I have learned in my 18 years of working in a corporate setup across a variety of organizations. So just diving into the content here, uh, request to organizers, if I'm not audible or if there is any pause, feel free to let me know. But I'll keep going on this monologue. So what's private equity? If you kind of think about it, and this you learn the first thing in your micro and macroeconomics in the first term starting 15 June. Fundamentally, businesses are, if you look at production is L to the power alpha and K to the power beta, right? where L is labor, K is capital, and alpha and beta are different degrees of quotient. You apply to that depending on the kind of business, what drives value there. Now, I'm not starting an economics class, but the fact that every business requires labor and every business requires capital, the ratios differ, right? If you think of a power plant, labor is not a big deal there. What is big deal is capital. You require money to put capital. You're sorry, a lot of background noise. You require capital.
Um,
Sorry,
Sorry,
can you guys
request
put yourself
people
on
to
mute?
please mute yourself.
Amit, could you unmute yourself again now? I've unmuted everyone else.
Yeah, thank you. So every business requires capital. If you look at a power plant, the labor part is pretty low. It requires hardcore capital to put up the plant, put up the machinery, and therefore the K element is much higher. If you contrast with a management consulting or a IT services type business, a business like WhatsApp or Microsoft, capital is much less, but you require absolutely high degree of intellectual talent. So L and the alpha becomes very high. But needless to say, everybody requires capital. Now, when you require capital, you have two ways to go about it. You go equity, you go debt. All of you understand it pretty well. Debt is something where you're supposed to assure returns and you're supposed to give capital back. Equity is where people take risk, and you have lots to cover in your term one, term three, I think. Uh, First time when you read about corporate finance, but essentially, this is the color of money which takes risk with entrepreneurs, and this has both private flavor, which is people like us, and public when you go IPO and you make listed companies. So our business is to provide equity. Where do we get that capital? It's not our money. We do represent the capital. We are the fiduciaries of that money. But where that money comes in, and that's at the core of our business model, which I'll spend a minute on. What private equity basically does is we go to pension funds, sovereign funds, where there's large pools of capital. So imagine, your parents who have been giving pension for last 50 years, doctors, teachers, employees of various organizations. Now in India, that money is not allowed to invest in, the risky forms of capital called private equity. But in the Western worlds, like the US and the Europe, including in some of the Middle East countries, that capital is allowed to be invested into these riskier forms called private equity. And therefore it's called alternate assets, because traditionally all this money has been invested into government bonds and they made 2 to 3% return at best. The idea is for the pensioners to get more money, and therefore they've started allocating a small pool of that large capital into this business called private equity. So we basically go to them, who are our investors. So if you look at on the left, this is where we raise our funds. We go to them, and this is not small chump change. These are billions and trillions of dollars, large amounts of capital being deployed. So that's step one. And I'll talk about why this cycle and how beautifully that cycle works and breaks. Once you get that capital, which is when the real business starts. And the real business for us is you kind of look forward, not to sound like a visionary, but do take history in cognizance, but also the fact that what are the overlaying trends for future, which when married with the history of a company, what kind of returns can you expect? That's called beta play, which is you sitting, all of you sitting at ISP can pick a stock of Hindustan Lever, Tata Motors, whatever with this analysis. Where private equity comes in is not only to say that I have studied this company well and these are the macro and the forward looking trends, but you then go one step forward and say, if I were to own that company and I were to own that in a reasonably high stake, call it controlling stake, where I can call the shots on management, strategy, growth plans, what difference can I make to that company, right? So if I own this for 5 to 7 years, and if the business on its own were to go from A to B, can I take that business from A to C? C obviously being better than B. And that's our core, in corporate finance, as you'll get to term three, as I said, they'll give you a term called alpha, that if you make the returns the market is going to make, that's beta. And the idea is to make those companies better, bigger, better, and more profitable from a shareholder standpoint. And that's called alpha generation. Now, if you do that, then you make those companies in 5 to 7 years more scalable. You create jobs on the way. You really create impact on the society and your other stakeholders. And then sell those companies, because it's a bit like, we don't own any business for forever. So if you bought the company for $100 or $100 million, We made them better with all the operating interventions we spoke about. And if we sell that for $300, of the $200 of profits, we will give 80% of the money back to the people we got it from and keep 20% as our profit or our incentive share. So the business is fully aligned for the individuals who work for it to behave like the owner of the company and make sure that we make our money only if the business and the companies in itself are growing well. Now, this is a little bit like a Bollywood type issue where, if Salman Khan does not give a great blockbuster on day one, then what he gets paid next time is kind of determined by the fact that what was the last box office hit he gave, right? So therefore the cycle, if you made money, last time you rose $100 from somebody and you went back and gave him 300, I think it's more likely than not that you will get large part of the 300 back to invest again, and then you keep doing the cycle. But boy, if you lose that $100 or a portion of it, then be rest assured that the cycle does not work. So it's a kind of a business where there is a virtuous cycle, but it takes only one or two bad performances for the cycle to break. But it's pretty enterprising, I must say. It's a business where you truly put your as they say, you put your money where your mouth is. You're joined to the hip on value creation. You're as aligned with your customers and as aligned with your portfolio companies as it can get. Demanding career because of what we just spoke. A few mistakes, and if you lose capital, that effectively means that the pensioner who at the age of 60 was expecting his pension does not get his pension. So there's a lot of, I would say, high morale underlying this, so-called capitalistic business model. So that's private equity. There are various types of private equity. It's a very broad brush term, but think of this as 4 types of funds, and those funds come into these companies at various stages in their life cycle. You have something like, there's something which I've not written called angel, which is somebody at in your class wants to start a business right at the campus. It may so happen that the 4 coordinates or now 4 virtual coordinates may invest money in it. That's angel investing. Or your last boss, your friend, your family. Once the business gets to certain kind of traction that there is something beyond a PowerPoint, people do what's called as venture investing. And then you grow the business, you do growth. And then finally, at a large scale, when the business has to go to different regions or different product categories and grow globally, is when large funds like us come in, and we call it, buyout. And the word buyout basically means that we have acquired a controlling stake and not a small investment. So, but all of that. So if you think about names like Sequoia, Nexus Partners, SoftBank, Alibaba, they largely play in the first 2 buckets where they come in early into the company, invest behind those. And if you think about names like Blackstone, KKR, Carlyle, they all play in, what's called as, the buyout and the bigger deals, where basically you're coming into mature companies and trying to make them bigger and better. So I'll stop here. We will take questions on this part of the section. Because I represent Blackstone, I thought I'll give you a sense of what it means. And then we'll stop the private equity section and go to the more interesting part of the conversation, in my view, for this class. But just as Blackstone, in case you're interested, you can Google it. We're listed in New York. We're about $70 billion of market cap. The company is not very old. We're just about 35 odd years into business. Close to about $500 billion is what we manage with a very small team. Roughly, I would say about 150 people manage $150 million on the PE side of the business, and similarly on the 4 businesses we have laid out here: private equity, real estate, hedge fund. So again, it's a business where what matters is the quality rather than the quantity. And it's a business where we just spoke about performance on a fund-to-fund basis is the only metric of success. So that's on private equity industry overview. I'm sure you have tons of questions, but I wanted to give you a glimpse of what that business is. But let's get to the more interesting part of the discussion for today. I don't know if I'm doing this or this is a online response to my speech, but there are some scratches. I don't know if that's an online way to protest that, it's we don't like this speech, but I would take that as some kind of a tech issue. So
It's
breaking.
actually an option. We'll get that disabled, Amit, for you.
Okay, no, I don't need that to be honest. Uh,
Okay.
so let's get to the interesting part of it. If you guys have questions on PE and what the PE does and all, I'm happy to answer it in the Q&A section. But let's talk to the class of 2021, or why are you here and what you should be thinking about. I think number one, number two, number three request is don't get carried away by the fact that this is for placement. And I know it's very tough. I was in the same shoe in April 2007 when I joined the class, and before you land there, McKinsey lands there and consulting firms lands there and tell you what a big miss will it be if it is not if you don't turn up at one place versus the other place. So please don't get into it. Tough to avoid, but I can only tell you in hindsight that invest for a little longer. And this is not to say that try to bullshit yourself by saying, let me be complacent about near term, but keep your radar on the long term, right? And that'll probably help you. And the reason I say it with confidence much more now than I would in 2012, 13, when I used to be doing these sessions, is almost a decade or 12 years after, when I look at my class, I think there are a bunch of very successful, happy, satisfied people and who all have something to relay back to ISB to say that if ISB wouldn't have happened, this wouldn't have happened. Now, if you would have done the same survey in 2009, maybe there was a part of the class who was almost not there. If you did it in 2013, a significant portion came in. If you did the same survey in 2020, 2020 or 2019, 99% of the class would come in. I mean, the 1% of the world is always skeptical about the world around, right? So just keep that big picture. So I thought I'll take a step back and share three things with you on what could really help you on if you really want to be successful in life. Forget about and try to start use this 1 year to see if you can develop part of it, if not all of it. Right? What's the number one thing? I think the number one thing is grit. Now, it's a very tough word to even explain, right? Somebody asked me, what's your biggest reason to be where you are today? And I think my answer there is this word called grit. And I've been exploring a little bit more about this word myself. So I'm not, I would say I'm not comprehensive about it, but let me share whatever half-baked knowledge or point of view I have on grit. Grit is something which is somewhat beyond hard work and perseverance. Yes, you require that. So there are a bunch of words, which is hard work, attitude, commitment, resilience. It's kind of a sweet cocktail of all of it, right? Where it's one way to think about grit is there something where you are at it? Being at it on something is what I would call grit. And most people, trust me, and I say it with some more confidence and anecdotal data, at least having worked with multiple people and hired multiple CEOs, being at it over a long period is one of the most difficult things. But trust me, where you're now going to start, when you come out in April 2021, unless you plan to do a PhD or a second MBA, you are in it for a 40-year run, if not a 50-year run. And by the time maybe medicine will develop to the extent that you are in for a 70-year run. When you take that 40, 50, 60, 70-year run, the one thing which will not fail you is grit. So if you can develop that grit, that's the number one criteria of, in my mind, and I mean it, the number one criteria for you to be successful long-term in corporate. So what, you crack a great job, right? Will you become, let's say you crack the consulting firm you want, or you get to the product manager job you want. What after that, right? There is no other degree. There is no other interview. Then it's your day-to-day performance. And I think that's why the second point, or why grit is important in a corporate setting, and why you should think about developing a little bit of that. And we'll talk about what that means at campus. So why is grit important, right? All along, and I assume most of you come from Indian ethnicity and Indian education, we are being trained, good or bad. It's not an opinion on the Indian education system. But what is fundamentally our Indian education system? Our Indian education system is, and I'm a classic output of it. So just a big disclaimer. I've always been an academic Magoo type guy. So I can see the contrast on why I took a lot of time to, having done academically well, why it took time to do well in the corporate setting, because the ask was very different. In an academic setting, you're being asked, here are the bunch of 100 questions. By the way, 20 of them nobody solved in their life. Remaining 80, you have to solve, and you only have 1.5 hours. Where the average guy will take 2.5 to solve, can you solve that in 1.5 hours, right? And therefore, there is this, that's why the title is sheer intellect. So sometimes intellect takes over, sometimes over practice, where you just mug up so much that if you have the ability to vomit the fastest in the examination center, you get there, right? Depending upon the subject, either it's the intellect or it's your ability to really practice hard, which makes you successful in an academic setting. But you then fast forward and you all have worked for 2 to 4 years. Think about in business, yes, you got a deadline, but did it happen that if your deadline of 12 o'clock was not met, you would not change a business strategy if you got that idea at 12:30 in the afternoon, right? Or at 1 o'clock, right? I think the fundamental difference in a corporate setting is, are there managers, are there business leaders who are wanting to solve the problem? It doesn't matter whether you solved it in 1 hour or 2 hours, right? And therefore you may say, I find it very strange that this guy was so average in my school, but he's doing so well in life. Why is that? Because that average guy, poor guy, may not have solved the problem in 1 hour in the exam, but he has the stamina and the grit to be at it on the problem statement of either the market entry or cracking the pricing or cracking the discount or whatever the corporate problem is. Because corporates don't care, or corporate careers or entrepreneurship don't care about, are you solving the fastest? They first care, are you solving it or not, right? And I think that's why grit becomes important. And most people, I often ask this, when people say that, I'm very passionate about physics, right? I'm an engineer, and my idea is to ask that, how many people solve a problem after the time runs out in an examination? That's a great way to measure grit or passion about a topic, right? Nobody does, or most people don't, which means they're all kind of a little bit bullshitting themselves, not anybody else, that they really like physics. Because they liked it, nothing stops you to solve the 20% of the problem after the exam time is over, because that's exactly how corporate works. Your meeting may get over, your deadlines may get over, but if you have not solved that, are you truly applying your mind consistently till you solve it? And that becomes very important. And I'll talk about how you can do that at ISB. And finally, how do you develop it? That's the toughest question, actually. For me, I was born and brought up in a extremely middle class family in Chittorgarh. For me, the choices are very clear. Either I run a kirana shop, or I go to IIT, right? Or I do something with education. So kind of education became a bit of a passport for me to do reasonably well in society and potentially give it back to the society give back to the society at some point in time. So it somewhat started with insecurity, right? Which is the case with many people, coming with similar backgrounds. And soon when I went to IIT for the first time, and I saw a bunch of really bright people, and the fact that, I was, for the lack of a better word, in that club, the fear of not losing that club, I had a lot of affinity stroke pride in being in that circle. And that greed to be in that circle continuously, and then the affinity of that people kind of kept me going from IIT to then ISB to McKinsey. And then I think over the last few years, I don't know whether it's true or not, I tend to believe I have a degree of passion about investing. And therefore now I'm going. So I really don't know how you develop it. Maybe it's a combination of insecurity. If you guys truly know what your passion is, then you're sorted. I took a lot of time to get to what I think. I still don't know what my passion is. But keep in mind that if you're telling something you're passionate about, are you demonstrating that in your input variable called grit? So that's the number one thing I want to leave you with. What it means is, if you're passionate about a topic, ISB has the best resources, whether it's the library, the faculty, the people around. Truly ask yourself, is there one agenda you want to be at it, right? That agenda can be an academic subject, that agenda can be a business plan, that agenda could be going to McKinsey or investment bank or going abroad or whatever. Are you truly at that agenda? And a lot of that starts with curiosity about it. So curiosity is the tip of that arrow before you pick the grit. So that's I guess the number one thing which makes people successful. People who are curious and then they're at it usually get there, right? I think the second thing is people's trust. Right? This is very underrated, and mostly because I don't know your class mix, but our class mix was significantly, and that's the issue with some of the India cohort. Uh, you have a predominance of uh, this engineering cohort, which are who think that equations and mathematics solves everything, and life is just black and white. But the reality is life is very gray. So I hope that your non-engineering crowd, and I would say non-CA also, because they are even more black and white than probably engineers are. Engineers at least have physics; they only read maths and accounting. You when you have this grayness, when you hit the corporate world, you soon realize that for you to become a better leader, the trust of, depending upon again the industry you're in, the trust of either your customer, the trust of your boss, the trust of your team, sometimes the trust of your shareholder, if you're an entrepreneur, that is beyond just numbers, because for many good reasons numbers may not come through, right? But is there a fundamental trust which drives it? Now how do you develop this fuzzy equation called trust? And that's something you have such a great crowd between the two campuses, and maybe 800 900 people to experiment, that can I enjoy the trust of my colleagues and my friends? Now how do you develop that? There are four levers, right? Credibility. There are people who you like, you may not like, you may not like their face, you may not like how they dress, but when they open their mouth, they talk sense. So when you have a real problem, those are the people you often call, right? And that's trust on credibility. It's a bit like, you will see it very soon. There are people who will make CPs, class participation. There will be two kinds of people. One, you will know that this guy is just making a CP for the sake of it, right? He's losing your trust because he's not credible. And equally, there may be people who have they have never spoken to you, and you have never spoken to them. But if he or she is raising their hand to make a comment, you probably will look forward to in a case on what this individual has to say. Mind you, in the process, that individual has generated trust with you on sheer credibility, because he or she has read the case, has a point of view, is speaking the mind out, right? The second is reliability, which is whether you know the answer or not, you're there to just hang around to help, right? Your true friend, that I'm there if you need it at 1 a.m, and we'll figure out who has the answer, but let's just try to be there. And if can you be that reliable person to few of your people in your class, and you will generate trust. Lots of parties will happen. That's a great way to be intimate, know people, make friends, truly close friends. And sometimes intimacy does lead uh, to trust, which is probably your case with your own family, right? Sometimes your wife is not the most credible one. You often don't rely on her because she may not pick up your phone, but you're just so intimate that you do trust her, right? There's a degree of liking, which is where the trust starts. And finally, which is I would say the euphemism of trust, is if there is a way you can establish such a strong personality that you mean business, you mean a selfless agenda, that people who have never seen you, people who have never talked to you, trust you. And that's called, mathematically put, trust is equal to 1 upon lack of self-orientation. That for long, if you keep telling people that I have nothing else in my mind, but the fact that I have your good in my mind, and if people believe you that you have your, their good in your mind, I'm telling you, people will trust you, right? Our prime minister is a classic example, right? People don't vote for him, or not only vote for him because they think he's the best economist or he's running the country the best way, but there's a fundamental trust that there is at least no personal agenda. He has no family. He's a guy who came with such a background that his only and only agenda is to help the country. And look at the amount of approval ratings he enjoys, right? uh, how do you experiment all that? As I said, make the most credible CPs in your class. You will know, are you credible or not? Are you perceived credible or not? Make good friends on reliability. If you can really find people who you like, lots of couples got formed and deformed in our batch. So make sure you're on the right side of that. And finally, if you can play larger roles and responsibilities at the organization level, whether it's the academics, placements, there are a bunch of clubs which will get formed. if there's a way you can truly generate the trust of the people that I will stand for your purpose and not mine, I think you're on the right side of the trust. So do use this 1 year to find what's your natural lever when you build trust, right? Because you will know over a period of time that this is how, and you can go back, people who have come from client facing businesses into this IT services or consulting or any other setup where you are truly working with the client, ask yourself, which is the dimension I need to improve upon, and which was the dimension I was exceptionally good at. But that will go a long way if you have the determination and you can build the trust of people. Then there's only one more thing which can come in your way of becoming a great leader, and that is how do you make decisions? Because when you have the trust of people, you have an agenda you're driving, there will come a time when you will become a real leader. You all want to become a leader. Some of you already are, maybe most of you already are, but there will come a time that you will be right at the top of the organization. Either you will build yourself, or you will, grow into an organization like an MNC or a company, or or a setup like an academic institution or a government organization or an NGO, where when you'll be right at the top and you have the confidence of everybody, right? And you have the trust of everybody, you have a purpose. How will you decide? And that decision will have three things, right? To come to these, so-called right decisions. Firstly, I don't believe that, the sixth sense is somewhat overrated, right? People get sixth sense, but you cannot rely on your sixth sense to be a reputable model of success. And therefore, it's always good to go back to data. Mr. Murthy used to say that we trust in God, everybody else bring data. So I think follow that model. That are you basing your decisions just by saying that, what, I know it all and this is how I have seen it and that is it, or there is real data to back that. And I think this kind of becomes your own enemy, because when you have experience, you tend to believe, why the heck do I have experience? I have experience because I want to apply, my intuition. But at the same time, the world is changing so fast that the recent data may be very different from the data from before, right? So that's one. And second is, are you intellectually honest to say that, I don't know this actually? Yeah. And third, which is probably the most important one, and that's a skill I would say you should wet your feet on. Tough to get it fully there in 1 year at ISB, but this judgment, and I think that's where I love Indian School of Business, apart from amongst all the business schools in India at least. This is one school, and I wish I had this internalization back in April 2007. I took these case studies as assignments. Obviously they are, and you should do a full justice to them. But the most important thing is, if you go back to the point we have been discussing, read through these case studies and try to get into a bit of a character of the CEO of that company, right? And then try to apply what would you would have done. And I know this is the basic ask every time the prof says it, but not many people in the class internalize this. Do spend a lot of time, because what it will do is to accelerate the experiences which many CEOs have gone through without going through that. And that is what will create what I call as mental models in your mind, right? Like today, having now lived 17 years of this corporate life, I do have mental models, right or wrong, about which sectors in India do well, which sectors in India don't do well, what happens if you make these three mistakes, or what happens if you have invested in a brand like this. Now, as I said, this does sometimes conflict with your analytical rigor, and therefore you have to have the intellectual honesty to kind of balance this judgment and analytical rigor or the data right then. But if you can live through those 15, 20 case studies, which means you have experienced what the most critical problems 20 CEOs have faced across marketing, sales, corporate finance, it's phenomenal, right? And it's often underrated. People don't even read the cases, right? And land up in the class, and obviously you get your assignment done. But what you miss out on, it's unbelievable the number of WhatsApp messages I get on our ISB 2008 class that can you re-forward that case study? Can you, send me that framework in hindsight, right? And that's one issue. So I can only tell you that the case study format, please do super justice. Whether you're academic, whether you're gunning for consulting or not, who cares? Trust me. I mean, if you are gunning for consulting, make sure you borrow a CP and you get your marks and the TA is recognized and put the number so that you get your CGPA. But you don't forget, you're paid such a chunky money as fee. And the reason you're paying that much and contrast it with any type of undergrad you've done is exactly for this case study format where you have the best faculty from the globe, and I mean it, trying to help you. But, as they say, God can only help those who want to help themselves. So make sure that you just read these case study and try to internalize. So I'll stop here. The grit to succeed with a trust to, really have people on your side across in that stakeholder. And hopefully you develop the toolkit at ISB to take these right decisions, right? Because this again is a bit of a reinforcing cycle. And if you get these kind of three things right, I would say one is internal. Nobody can generate passion in you, hunger in you to do well. But the fact that you are already at ISB is a great signal that, you are among the more hungrier and the aspirational lot. But start to work on trust and try to build your own frameworks on how are you going to take decisions going forward in life. So with that, I wish you, good luck. Over to you guys for any Q&As.
Yeah. Thank you, Amit, for that amazing session. The top three things that even I learned after the session was have the grit to succeed, gain trust, and take the right decisions. Thanks a lot for that. So now we'll quickly ask a few questions from our side, and then we will move it to class of 2021. Okay, the first question here we have is, how do you make the most of 1 year at ISB?
Yeah. So, it's a tough question because there is just so much to be done, and you just graduated. You're probably better equipped than I am. I'm also aging, so I'm forgetting things from 2007-8. Having said that, I guess the way to think about it is if you put on the same framework or business, what exactly is ISB doing to you, right? Number one, let's not forget, as the name suggests, there is school in it, right? So a lot of us have done justice to schools in the past. That's why you're here. And a lot of us have felt that they could have done more justice to the school. Make sure that 1 year later, you don't have that, regret. And that regret unlikely is going to come 1 year later, trust me, because you'll all be very happy with the great jobs you'll get. But 5 years later, you may have that regret, because as you go senior, what is the biggest challenge of a CEO job? The biggest challenge of a CEO job, it's a very lonely job. Okay, you can't go to your shareholder and say, boss, mujhe chamak nahi raha hai, right? You obviously cannot go to your employees, otherwise people say, isko nahi chamaka to main yahan kya kar raha hu, right? And at that point in time, your moment of truth is your own intellectual strength. And trust me, I'm not saying that ISB can give you the entire toolkit, but get your concepts right, right? Get your concepts right. If you don't like a subject, obviously that's fine. But what should not happen is that if you truly want to be a business leader, that you don't have basic appreciation of accounts, finance. So I think the number one thing to do to get the most out of is for what you paid, these few lakhs for, which is get your basic concepts right. And I by no means I'm saying CGPA. CGPA should follow if you have the concepts right. And if you didn't get CGPA, it's fine. But number one thing I would do is to get the concepts right. Number two, and I didn't do such a good job. I wish I did more. Is to make more friends. As I said, we can be a bit more judgmental about our own niches and clubs. I'm from IIT. There are 10 other IITians. Before you land, there is a WhatsApp group these days. Try to see, how comfortable you are in uncomfortable settings, because this is as good a, bunch of people who you can always choose to ignore in life. Let's say, right? If you didn't like somebody from journalism or whatever, vice versa, journalism guy said that the IT guys have no sense of, where life is and where the world is. They're just into their numbers. Try to be comfortable in that setting of those people, because it may so happen that accidentally, incidentally, or where the cookie crumbles, you may land up in that group. So the second thing I would do is to try to get comfortable, make friends, at least try to strike conversations with people who you think are literally from Mars, in your view, right? And by the way, I must tell you, for everybody you think is from Mars, his or her feeling is very mutual about you. So be very cognizant that if you think that the guy from the other side is, how come he's here or she's here, uh, just at the same moment recognize that what if he or she is asking this, which means that you just have not discovered each other in terms of what your strengths are, right? I'm assuming you believe that why you are there is truly deserving, and therefore then translate that belief to the other. So I guess do well on acads. When I say acads, is do well on concepts, and to make most friends. Rest will follow.
Thank you, Amit. One more question. Any particular stream or subject that helped you the most in your career?
Uh, you know, I think the subject which helped me the most, and that's to do a little bit with me, is actually accounts. Mark Finn. I don't know if he teaches now, but Mark Finn was my prof, and then Bhagwan Chaudhary used to teach corporate finance. I came from engineering, and I was asked not to. I was not allowed. I was telling somebody before this started that I was not allowed in the finance club because I was a hardcore manufacturing guy. I was on the shop floor all the time. And before the classes started in this O week or whatever you guys call it now, I was typecasted into a manufacturing role. So I was in the general manager club. I was everybody's part of consulting club. You don't need an invitation. The entire class is part of consulting club. So I was part of consulting club. And then when I really tried getting into the finance club, they said, I think you're really wasting your time. You're a shop floor guy. Just as background, I used to run factories for Hindustan Lever before I joined ISB. So I was typecasted there, and maybe you call it ego, maybe you really call it intellectual curiosity or whatever. I said, let me just learn a little bit about finance. And I think I almost went back to drawing board, started with genuine basics on accounts and then built on corporate finance. And that's probably the subject I took the most. But because I was coming from HUL, I had some sense of marketing. Obviously, I'd done lots of manufacturing, so supply chain and all was additive. But finance for me was like, literally 0 to 100. So I took a lot out of the corporate finance, M&A, and basic accounting. Actually, I never knew what T accounts are. I don't know if you guys have this basic accounting course before it even starts, which is for foundation or something. So I started there. I never drew a T account before that in my life.
Okay. We do have basic accounting as a pre-term for all the students who join
I would
the.
say it's again one of those must for everybody. You don't have to master it, but even if you run the most creative business, right? Uh, Eventually, if you're running business, you will make your balance sheet at some point in time. So have the appreciation, have at least enough appreciation that somebody does not fleece you of your money if you are doing hard work to create it, which is your CFO should not, you know, uh, do some Jimmy and jugglery while you are sweating hard to create your own business. So do have that appreciation of finance and accounts.
Okay. One last question from my side. Why is there such a high burnout rate in consulting industries where the most promising young talents drop out only after a few years?
Yeah, it's maybe a politically insensitive comment, but the fundamental issue is, and this I've gone through so many times, so my answer is somewhat, I have a preconceived notion about it. I guess the, the only way to think about it is, the degree of infatuations to marriage ratio is just so low, right? And I think that's what happens a at a business school like ISB and maybe many other business schools. Before you land, there is this preconceived notion of this being the best job. Maybe it is, maybe it is not. There are more chances going by history that it is not. But when you start to then follow and you get kind of carried away with this infatuation without even knowing, is this for me, is this what I want to do? If you go there, the rubber does hit the road, right? And the reality comes through that, you know what, I don't want it. Maybe it was this trophy I wanted to have at the campus because the society around me, the world around me told me that this is the trophy. If you don't get out of, it's utter bullshit. Or you wasted your 1 year at ISB. The earlier you break out of it, I mean, I'm not saying consulting is a bad career, but is it for you or not? You should take that call. And if you don't, more often than not, those people result into that burnout or whatever you call dropout, because the issue is the input itself. It's not like the most passionate about consulting went to consulting. Yeah.
Thank you, Amit, for answering the questions. Now I move it to Shreya. She will personally take questions from students. Over to you, Shreya.
Right. Thanks, Anis. And thanks, Amit, for such an honest session. I got to learn a lot. And class of 21, I keep saying you guys are very lucky that you have these sessions. Like during our time, we didn't have any of it. So make the best out of it. We'll be taking questions from you guys now. So first question, Ajinkya, you have it. Go for it. Ajinkya, are you there?
Let's just call three names. One of them can at least unmute themselves and answer.
I'll move on to the next person. Shashank, you can have the next question.
Either I thoroughly bored people or I was absolutely clear.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Hi, Ajinkya here. Shreya, I was just able to unmute myself now. Is it okay to ask the question? Hi, Mr. Jain. Like a really nice session, and I've followed the private equity sector for a while, and I'm curious to hear from you. I mean, if someone's interested in the field, what is the path to come into private equity, especially a company like Blackstone for an MBA graduate from ISB?
Yeah, I think these are all very tricky questions, and I just want to make sure that I'm positive, but I'm also objective. I think the short answer to your question is do extremely well in whatever you choose to do, right? There are very few firms which will come at campus straight, right? On private equity, at least the bulge brackets, unlikely that they'll come, or at least they have not been coming at ISB. And it is not to do anything with the school. It's just the way the demand pattern in these firms work. They're very small teams, and we don't have time and energy to go through. So the first job you pick, whether it's investment banking, management consulting, and even operations, if you do very well there, what will lead to is strong references, which is what we do. Before we hire, we probably speak to 20 people on all types of things, from ethics to competence to commitment to grit, because we spoke about the business model, because this is not for, I would say, lose hearts. It's a relatively tough and a demanding environment. So I guess whatever you choose to do right after consulting, right after ISP, just do extremely well in it from a work quality standpoint. There is obviously a higher probability of conversion if you are at a management consulting firm or investment bank, not because of anything else, because they work across industries, and most of our job is also about working across industries. But it doesn't take away the fact that if you've gone to an industry and you've not spent 20 years there, you still have a way to switch. So I joined private equity, for example, 7 years after, 4 years at Hindustan Lever, 3 years consulting. But you should be willing to then restart. I started as a first year associate because I just thought that's the thing I want to do. Now, obviously, some of that experience helped me grow faster, but that was all a punt. So do well in whatever you choose to do. We are very finicky about, at a firm as Blackstone and generally private equity, we are very, very finicky about conceptual clarity. So going back to my point around academic concepts and all, whether you're CGP or not, you'll go through some 20 interviews, as I said, and 20 references. And if you're not clear on concepts, it will fall through the cracks.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ajinkya. Vishwadeep, you have the next question.
Hello, sir. Thank you for the session. Being a senior industry leader, what is your outlook on the placements this year? And how can school or the student body enhance the placement in terms of quality and quantity?
Yeah, it's early days. I think, firstly, the way you can, obviously different stakeholders have to do different stuff here. I think as a student body, there are a couple of things you can do. One, to start with, do well what you have meant to be, which is, uh, you know, literally learn about the concepts of business. Because what will not happen is it will not happen that it's very unlikely, knowing what we know today, that companies will not come to campus, right? We own several companies. I sit on the board of 10 companies. In none of our companies, we have an outlook that the life is going to be so bad that we are not going to go to the campus. But what will definitely happen is the bar will be high, right? And when bar is high, it's very important to do well in conversion and interviews, right? Because never forget that you do have, I'm Ahmedabad, I'm Bangalore, and multiple other campuses in India. And then, the world has become more global, and for good or bad, a lot of Indians floating around Harvard, Stanford, Wharton's, and INSEADs of the world, they all want to come back, given visa issues, given what's going on in the world. So in a manner, you are in a bit of a more tougher environment, relatively speaking. So do well in your own show is the first thing as a student community you can do, right? Don't get too distracted about the sadness around.
देख लो यार पैकेजिंग फिर और कौन से क्वेश्चन है फिर वो मैं नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन पे जंप करती हूँ
Guys, can you please mute yourself?
Okay, I'm muting everyone. Whoever has to unmute, please do. Amit, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I was saying that as the first stakeholder here, which is student community, just do your things right, stay positive. Don't worry about it. When we were graduating, we were in the middle of financial services crisis, right? September 08, and the world looked like falling apart. It doesn't happen like that. World will come back. So don't overwhelm yourself with what's happening around, and just stay on course. That's the first thing you can do. I think as a school, it's a bit of a forum where the right matchmaking has to happen. So depending upon where the class is and where the talent has come from, as a school you should be super active in ensuring that you can tap into the right companies, alums, so that they visit campus. At least they give it a shot, without any commitments and numbers and all. Because once you see a great talent as an organization or as a leader, you hardly say no to it, right? So that's the second thing from a school standpoint. I think finally I would say that what will become very tough, and I have to be objective and straight here, what will be tough is, or relatively more tougher in these environments is career switches. So have very calibrated views depending upon how soon this crisis continues and where things go. Because your biggest disappointment is your own expectation, is against your own expectation. Yeah, there's nothing. So what happened in a tough environment is people or companies look for ready deployability, right? Which means if you have some prior experience, either functional or industry as a domain, then you have higher employability on day one on the job, rather than investing for 1 year or 6 months or 2 years on a talent. And that on a relative basis for some companies may come down, right? And therefore, to that extent, just be calibrated. I'm not saying those things will not happen and shatter your dreams and say, what a wrong time to come to ISB. But if you don't want to be grossly disappointed, just calibrate your expectations on massive career switches, right? At this stage.
Well said. Thanks, Amit. Thanks, Vishwadeep. Rahul, you have the next question.
Hi, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Amit. Thank you for the session, first of all. So I come from a private equity background myself, and I would ideally like to go back to the industry post ISB. So my question is a bit tricky and specific. Why doesn't someone like a Blackstone come to ISB for hiring? Because you probably do go to other B schools. Is it the 2-year versus 1-year model?
No, we don't go to other business schools, by the way. The only school, so there are two funds within private equity. There's a private equity fund and there's a real estate fund. Just to be clear, because I run the recruitment for India for Blackstone. We don't, on the private equity side, we don't go to any business school, right? On the real estate side, we do go to IIM Ahmedabad, but that also we are not very frequent. We go alternate years. And I didn't catch your name, my apologies. But the answer there, the short answer is, if you think about a 20-member team where we are hiring once in 2 years, a campus recruitment is a lot of investment. To talk about the job, go to on that day zero. And in our setup, to hire a person requires everybody in the team has a veto. This is not to say that everybody is interviewing, but because we work so closely with each other, that if we have a 20-member office, all 20 members have to meet the guy and say that I do not have a reservation in hiring this individual, right? Because I have to work with him or her, right? And that setting to be replicated in a campus type setup where 20 people land up on day one and finish the interview in half a day. And as I just mentioned to as a response to somebody else, we do multiple reference calls. I remember when I got hired, even my landlord got a reference call. Ki bhaiya rent deta tha nahi deta tha time pe, right? So because the issue is we deal with money as our raw material and as an end product, and it's important that the financial integrity, the ethics, and the way you deal with people on day-to-day basis is kind of checked out. So depends on the fund. There are some funds who go to the campus who have probably cracked the model to hire at the campus. For somebody like Blackstone, we found it very hard to go to a campus and finish all that process in half a day and give a credible offer to the candidate. So unlikely will come to the campus.
Right. Thanks, Amit. Thanks, Rahul, for that question. Sorry, Amit, you were saying something?
No, go ahead. I'm saying, but we are open for business. So if you apply randomly, I applied randomly to ISB, to Blackstone. In fact, I'll tell you my story, which will probably give you some, and it's 100% truth because I've lived through it. So I got through a very small fund. I spent 2.5 years with McKinsey. I love the firm, awesome firm to be. I'm not selling consulting, it's been sold enough. But just as a firm, it was a decent firm to work with. One day, because I was an operator at Hindustan Lever, I used to feel slightly irritated and frustrated when my clients were not following the advice. And I was like, boss, you have to do this. And my partner came and told me, Amit, you're too involved. As an advisor, you're supposed to just give advice and stay calm. You can't get over passionate about what your advice is. And I said, maybe I run 4 years of factory, so I'm a bit more, I have much higher bias to action, and I want to take the calls. And that conversation, I was doing well. In that conversation, through some headhunters landed up with a small private equity firm. I don't want to name them. They gave me an offer. I resigned, and I met a gentleman called Adil who used to run McKinsey in India. And Adil told me one line that I can't forget. He said, if you want to change the sport you want to play, you change, but don't change the club you play. You play for a blue chip club right now. Join a blue chip private equity firm. I said, I think that's a great headline for a McKinsey slide, but these jobs don't come on a day-to-day basis, So while it's well said, I'm taking what I'm getting. So then he put and that's why I'm saying references work. He put an email to 3 firms, KKR, Blackstone, and there was a fund called New Silk Route back then. People who from the fraternity would know. A fund by actually where Rajat Gupta was an investor with Parag Saxena and all. Within no time, I got interview calls because obviously Adil was putting a reference, and I landed up at Blackstone in 5 days, right? Obviously after 20 interviews, getting comfortable. But the point I'm making is, that process just cannot happen at a campus. And 2, your people you work with, the champions you worked with, the people you work with, if they are championing your cause, that's probably the easiest way to get into private equity.
That's a wonderful story, Amit. Thanks for telling us.
Yeah. And by the way, I must add to that in that interview, all the corporate finance questions, I never did corporate finance. All the time at McKinsey, I was doing strategic operational transformation. I have to say it's strategic because everything consulting firms do is strategic. But I was fundamentally sitting in the middle of a mine and trying to figure out ops efficiencies there. Pretty strategically, I must say, in a top-down manner with some first principles problem solving, all the buzzwords. but uh, the interviews, strangely so, were a lot about corporate finance, right? And what I said earlier in my conversation, I'm thankful to the school and the classes there that I did get a great grip. You know, I'm actually very genuinely thankful to the club president in finance who never let me in, and because of that, I kind of spent more time on that subject, and the profs were just absolutely out of this world that I could, address those interview questions. They're hardcore corporate finance questions and all that. And I'm not exaggerating it. If you did well in your classes and in your cases, and I can go through the subjects if you want, you'll fare very well in a private equity type setup, or at least in an interview.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much, Rahul, for that question. Pratap, you have the next question.
Good evening, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, please.
Sir, thank you for the presentation. My question is related to the right decision-making approach, which you said, and there were two sort of subsets to it. One was analytical rigor, and the second was judgment, which is based on the mental models, which primarily, in my understanding, come from experience. And at times, these two can clash. So what should one do in such a circumstance?
Yeah, it's $1 million, maybe it's $1 billion question. To be honest with you, there is no right answer there, right? That's where the third leg comes in. You have to be intellectually honest. Does your gut truly, or your mental model, does overpower the analytics? Because that's what I do, as a business all the time. I joined the firm in 2010. In 10, 11, 12, maybe till 13, a lot of my role was around the analytical rigor. Whatever numbers speak is what it is. But the reality of businesses is, or one of the things you should get comfortable if you want to run businesses or lead businesses, is imperfect information. You will never have perfect information. There will be tons of ambiguity, right? And part of the reason I left consulting, to be honest, brutally honest, is, let's say if today you call somebody, I'll give you a classic example. If you call a McKinsey consultant or a BCG or anybody, I'm just naming names for not for particular reasons, but any management consultant, and say, what do you think will happen in COVID, right? More often than not, there's a very likelihood that they will give you a chart saying there are 3 scenarios in which potentially the world could play out. Scenario A, probability 30%, scenario B, probability 40%, scenario C, probability 30%, some weighted averages, numbers being here and there. Now, unfortunately, the world will not play out 3 ways with these probabilities. The world will play out with 1 way, right? And if you are a CEO or an investor, you'll have to take that view today and go with that. Because let's say the scenario is world will come back, you have to put the plant. If the scenario is the world will not come back, you will probably cut some cost structures. That judgment, that eventually which scenario you want to model your base case with and start your life, right? That's a mental model type exercise, right? So you got all the analytical exercise, to your point on analytical rigor on all the scenarios. I think in those situations, you go by your judgment, mental model more. But let's say if it is projecting, take a consumer business or a e-commerce business, where there is a world wisdom that such businesses, let's say, have not worked in China or in the US, and you believe that India is different and therefore it will work. Maybe I would go by the fact that there is, established, proven, data-backed approach which says that this business model just don't work, right? And therefore, even if my gut says that India is different and it should work like that, I would say, maybe I should refrain from applying that judgment. Am I making sense? So it's a subjective thing, but that's what you have to be intellectually honest about. Truly, is the data on your face giving you an answer, and you're just trying to take a strong point of view other way around, or there is real ambiguity, there is real imperfect set of information, and then you need to decide. And if that's the case, then I would go with my judgment.
Thanks a lot, sir. That answers my question.
I must say that this is a very intense class, by the way. Nobody is asking any lighter questions, and maybe you guys have not been to the campus and the drinking hasn't started, but I hope you guys have some lighter side to yourself.
I see around 20, 25 hands, Amit, for questions. And I think we just have 5 more minutes. Are you good to go for 2 more questions?
Yeah, I'm
Probably?
around. I'm around. I think I like this approval ratings of 5. Till the time this meter is showing the right ways, I think I'm on.
Perfect. So thank you, Pratap, for your question. Anand, you have the next question.
Yeah. Hi. Hi, Amit. So firstly, I would use this platform to thank you. I used to be working with the Blackstone real estate side as a consultant with Vikash Kadloya. And while
Right.
I was making a list of schools where I want to do an MBA from, your name was there on my pro list as to that you are associated with the brand. And that's how I like first considered ISB in my list of schools that I want to pursue MBA from. I have two
Thank you.
questions. Number one would be that we have a lot of gritty finance enthusiasts in our batch, and we have still like 9 months to go for placement. What would be your one or two suggestions that we could do differently to attract more companies in the fin space to our school? I understand it's structurally difficult for private equity players to come, but like maybe like top investment banks who are like going to some of the other coveted schools, what can we do it differently? That would be my first question. Second question is, how is the mood like in the top private equity firms right now? Are they seeing COVID-19 as a boom to basically deploy their dry powder, or are they sad about the losses in the valuation of the portfolio companies due to
Yeah.
the
Let me
markets?
take this. Yeah, I'll take the second one first. As you can imagine, you've been on the floor of Blackstone, so you know how the
Yeah.
firms think. Clearly, we see this as an opportunity, right? Now, this is not to say that you go out and party and this is the best time you could see. But as an investor, one of the times when you make the most money is when market dislocations happen, right? Two simple ways to think about it. If you think world is going to go under, then anyway there is no business model left and there is nothing to be done. If COVID is the end of the world. But if COVID is not end of the world and the world is going to come back, which is what every type of history suggests, whether it's global financial crisis, SARS, MARS, 1912, Spain flu, Spanish flu, all of it, right? Then it's a great time to invest, right? Hungry people like yourself, the class of 2021, they will do something good about this country, right? So if that's your worldview, even if India grows at 5%, inflation will do another 4 or 5, you have a 10% growth coming in. And if you're at a cyclical low, hopefully from here in the market should deliver, respectable mid-teens return, if not more. So I think forward, but we are also very cautious that there is no point, filling the truck very early. The pain can increase, and the next 4 quarters we'll see, in our view, some more pain coming through, which is still not reflected in the valuations. You see net Nifty at 10,000, Nasdaq is at its all-time high. So to answer your broad question, we are absolutely very open for business as an industry and particularly as Blackstone. But are people cutting left, right, center checks today? I think probably people are more cautious. The speed will kind of accelerate in a few quarters to come, and the pain will deepen and will reflect in the valuations. On your first question on what can you guys do, look, again, I go back. It's not like people don't get opportunity. There are two structural issues, and some of it may have got solved. But there are two structural issues on why ISB has not done as well. Not to be read in absolute terms, we have not done well. Relatively as well in an investment banking or finance fraternity versus in a consulting fraternity, right? What are the two reasons? One reason is a bit structural. Average age of an ISBN graduating is probably 27, 28, right? It's a very different, I'm not giving any data cut and all. I'm just giving you live when I interact and I interview what goes in our minds as employers sometimes, right? Which I was also pushed very hard on in my own interview. When you have a 27, 28-year-old guy trying to, or maybe 26 if you're on the younger side, you go to a Blackstone or go to a Morgan Stanley, Kotak, wherever you want to start. Firstly, if you are coming from the industry, then it's great. Anyway, those people have higher conversion. If you're not coming from that industry, what it means is you have to sign up for a starting role. Now, let's say you say, boss, I'm all guns blazing. I'm willing to restart my career at 28, 29, absolutely as an analyst where shit will flow down. But the issue which an employer has at that point in time is one, the shit really flows down, right? There is tons of work. There are tons of books to be made. It is long hours. And if you at 27, 28, more often than not, you are either in a relationship or you're about to get married. Some people are adventurous. They have kids by the time they come out of ISB, right? In that setup, it is very difficult to then sign up. I know, Shia, you're smiling, but we did have 8 kids, by the way, when people were at campus. Legit, all right couples, by the way, just to a disclaimer. You have people walking into the first job with a 27, 28, and the reality hits you when you see an I am Ahmedabad guy or a I am Bangalore guy who is 24 because that, or 23 because 21 he graduated engineering or CA. Sida apna I am Ahmedabad, and then 23. Now you're at 28. So 6 months you are in the aura. Oh, I've got the fig job. 6 months later, you're like, boss, what am I doing with this kid here, right? And if you have that patience to run through, sometimes you get through, but some of the historical experiments have not worked. So there is a degree of structural issue, which is just the fact that, and that's part of the reason you do very well on consulting side, because there you beat that kid hands down all the time on maturity. That kid is like half the time drinking only because he's like in a gala time, you know, IIT, IIM has never seen free pizza and drinks. Like the best time ever on a client study, right? And he loses it. And that's when, you know, consulting, our school and the mature people we are do so well because your ability to connect with the client, solve the problem, you know, give some historical perspective from your own experience. So there is a degree of structural issue, and I'm not saying that makes it a non-starter, but the toughest question I had to answer is, you've done so well, you run a factory with 500 people reporting to you. Why would you start bottom up in Blackstone? And my only answer was, I have a return offer from McKinsey. So if I fail, I have a deal with Adil that I'll go back. And that's the only reason they were, you know, okay. And apart from the fact that I could at least answer some of the corporate finance questions as if a 22-year-old, you know, I'm in the Ahmedabad kid is answering. But that's a real issue. And how do you solve for it? I think you have to just go and keep talking about that point, that we appreciate, take it head on. We appreciate that our ages are, you know, probably 2 years ahead or 3 years ahead. But as a school and as, you know, as a group of people, particularly, you are signing up to that issue, right? So that's, you have to go head on with that proposition, particularly to places where you have alums sitting. The second issue, which is a structural issue, is it's not an internship one, but, you know, the format is such that first 4 terms, again, there's nothing right, nothing wrong. People run for CGPA in core terms, right? First, it'll come first term, how many 4-on-4s are there? Maybe the count will be 26, then it'll drop to 16, then it'll drop to 4. Maybe by the 4th term, there'll be 1 guy or none, right? But somehow, and I don't know why that happens, but when the craze for CGPA goes, your curiosity for knowledge should not. And I'm sounding a bit like professor here, I should not. But that's the core issue, because some of the better courses from a financial, if you really want to crack a finance job, like CCMA, you know, you'll get corporate controls, mergers and acquisitions, CCMA 1, CCMA 2, people who are from the class of 2020 will know, all come in 5 and 6, right? You may want to do advanced accounting in term 6 or term 7. And that time you should not worry about whether I want to do CGP or not, because the issue is when you interview people and they say, I have a major in finance, and you say, what is the EBITDA to free cash flow, right? And by the way, incidentally, a chartered accountant, with all due respect to them, they fall flat in an interview like that, right? Now, that somehow does not happen with the I'm in the bad guy. Now I'm talking averages here, right? So one of the issues with ISB is that our Six Sigma, you know, if you're doing statistics courses already, our Six Sigma is pretty big. You know, if you put our flat, we have obviously our own set of brightest 3 Sigma this side, but we also could have some 3 Sigmas this side, right? The average is somewhat same, but the Six Sigma for an IIM Ahmedabad is pretty narrow. I'm just saying as an interviewer experience, right? If I interview 20 people of ISB who claim I've done finance and 20 people of IIM Ahmedabad, average will come out same, but there'll be an extremely creative guy in ISB. But, you know, these IIM Ahmedabads of the world are pretty boxed in that Six Sigma risk. So how do you solve for it? You know, I can only say again, go back to concepts. You know, really don't fall off the cliff just because, you know, core terms are over and now CGPA is not required for McKinsey or consulting firms. Keep at your conceptual clarity points, particularly for finance guys. And I'm sure maybe it's equally true for marketing and all. Those are subjects I'm not a master at. But corporate finance, I can see through people, or even accounts, I can see through people who have been a little bit shallow versus they genuinely know their shit. And you've been at Blackstone, so
Yeah.
when you have to link one Excel with another, there is no ambiguity. You have
Yeah.
to link which cell to which cell. So either you're clear or you're floating around.
Yeah.
And if you're floating around, you can't find an anchor. You'll disappear.
Yeah. I remember you saying once that we are assumed to be 100% correct every time with the Excel model. And that is why we have to focus more on the presentation, because you're supposed to.
At least I'm consistent. See, to the ISB and to the Blackstone group. Yeah.
So this was pretty insightful, Amit. Just one follow-up question. Do you think a small internship like model could help, like just specific to
100%.
maybe private equity players, a
100%.
post-MBA internship? Like
We were
since we have
talking
1
about
year
it
only.
before the session started. 100%. Any career switch, by the way. Forget about this. People want to see proof of concept, right? If nothing else, they want to see the proof of concept of your liking and passion for the job, right? So, in manufacturing guy wants to do marketing. This is not for finance only. People want to see. So, if there is a way you can go demonstrate that I'm happy to take a job on a 3-month probation, and then you see my performance, and you decide. That'll obviously give people more comfort, because everybody wants to create option values.
Thank you so much.
Especially in an environment like COVID. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'll reach you offline on that later with a pitch. And just one of the key learnings from today's session was that we won't be refusing anyone entry to Finance Club this year. Thank you.
Yeah, please don't do that, man. Because those are the ones who are likely to take finance jobs, because you create
you have set a great example. So we'll take a note and pass it on the next batches.
Right. Amit, I think I say this on behalf of everyone. We really appreciate the honesty that you're bringing to the table. Are we good to go for a few more questions? Just let us know whenever you want. Okay.
I have till 7. I have at 7 o'clock also. I have time. Don't worry. Unless my battery runs out.
And there are a lot of questions. So I'll just quickly go to the next one. Shashank, you have the next question.
Hi, Amit. Thanks for the wonderful session. So I just have a couple of questions related to the PE or a VC field. So I'd want to understand who is a PE VC job for? Like, what's the person who's most suited for PE VC job, and what are the qualities that PE or VC firms look for while hiring up any individual?
Maybe early to answer that, but I think the one way to think about this PE VC type jobs is VC is slightly different, to be honest, because the two personalities are. Let me speak about PE, and I'll quickly give you a glimpse of VC, though I'm not there, so my comment is also outside in. And the PE job is for people who I would say has the ability to just consume lots of information and data and kind of bring a few insights to say that if these are the things which were to be changed, this is how that business can change or improve, right? More often than not just change, because we don't want to change businesses for downside. Now, what does that's the objective of the role. So what does that mean in terms of personality traits? Number one, you have to be analytical. Number two, you have to have ability to generate, synthesize, and articulate with courage and confidence your point of view, right? Today, if I'm told that so many people are putting billions of dollars in a telco company, do you want to put or not put? That's an answer my investment committee, as a managing director of the firm, seeks from me, right? And what does that mean? It requires exactly this skill set, which is have the information. A lot of people have the information, have the analysis. Either people don't know how to synthesize and articulate. And by the way, this is not summarizing. This is truly figuring out what does it mean, right? And you'll be taught a lot through the year on this point. And have the courage to take that point of view, right? So analytical skill, ability to make or create a point of view, and then have the courage to speak that up. Third, it requires extreme amount of security. One of the things about a lot of consulting firms is insecure overachievers do very well, right? People are always on the run, right? These people are best CGPA, this gold medal, that gold medal, national champion, because there is some kind of a spike before you land in any of these consulting firms. But if you cut through it, I have found in my personal observations, there are a lot of times when people are insecure about themselves. Now, insecurity is not necessarily bad. I know it has a negative connotation, but that's one way people get driven. The grit point I mentioned. Sometimes insecurity is a great driver to being at it, but that thing can kill a great investor, because if you're insecure, you can have this anxiety about activity, which is, oh, I've not done a deal for 2 years, I've not done a investment for 3 years or 6 months, or my competition is doing this. You require a very secure personality, somebody who has his mind kind of a little bit anchored uh, in uh, in reality, and he or she is comfortable with herself. So a person with lots of analytical comfort, ability to speak his point of view, and finally is very secure about so that he or she does not get into the what we call as deal heat, that I have to get a deal done, because we are not rewarded for getting deals done. What we are rewarded for is getting the right deals done, right? And there's a lot of difference, and the difference between the two is fundamentally making sure that you are very secure about yourself. So that is it. I can't think of, and that's what we look for. Are there people who have been secure about themselves? Can they deal with data? So we would do a bunch of case studies, throw reports, and as I said, we will debate everything, from COVID to Modi's view of Modi's response to COVID. That does this guy have a point of view? And can he articulate and defend that point of view with right articulation? So,
Right. Thanks, Amit. Karan, you have the next question.
Hi, Amit. Thank you so much for the session. So I have two questions. First, so I understand, so PE jobs do look lucrative from outside, but how can one understand that if PE is a good fit for them? And so I have some experience in VC, and I find VC very interesting. But as we move towards PE, I understand that it moves more towards quantitative from qualitative. So that was my first question. And secondly, I wanted to understand if there is any hard criteria, or if there is a very typical career progression to get into private equity. For example, you moved from McKinsey to Blackstone, and that's like quite a common career progression. So is there like a typical career path or a hard criteria to get into PE?
So the answer to the second one is absolutely no. While I did move from McKinsey, I did 4 years with Hindustan Lever, right? And as I said, I moved to PE when I was 29 years old as a first year associate, where you may find bunch of kids which are very young. So it's not a. I don't think there is any set criteria. Obviously, it becomes tougher like any other job change, both for you and for the employer to take that call. But on the first one now. My suggestion would be that just interview, and obviously you will get to know the firm will also get to know you. So there is a unlikely there'll be adverse selection. If you're not a fit, they will tell you that this is an issue. At the highest level, the way to think about VC, and I didn't answer that question even to the last guy, sorry about that. VC is a bit more, VC and angel or early stage is a bit more, I have a lot of respect for them, because they're kind of they're visionary type people. They'll meet somebody over coffee and they'll say, this guy will become next Dhirubhai, or this guy can become next Bhavish. And I say it with, I know somebody's smiling. I genuinely mean it. I never had this ability or charisma to meet somebody for coffee or spend a few hours and then say, what, take $10 million of mine and make a unicorn. And if that's your DNA, if that's your intrinsic capability, and you are that sales charming guy that you can swing the needle, and you have the ability to form forward-looking views, look into the sky and say, this is how India will look like in 2035. By the way, I don't know what it will be in 2021. I think it's a great thing for you. if you are the person who's a bit more hardworking, bit more sane, saying, let me just look into history, right? And figure out what are the snippets of history which have such a recurring pattern that I can extrapolate them and then do, you'll be taught this concept called ceteris paribus, which is you keep n number of variables constant and you only move one variable and see the change on the output. If you can start to see long history and then play a bit of ceteris paribus, that should I change the marketing strategy of this company, what happens? Should I change the ops strategy of this company, what happens? And if you are of that DNA who fundamentally is hardworking, looking into the history to predict future, you're probably for PE. But if you're looking into future to predict future, you probably are more for VC.
Great answer, Amit. Thanks, Karan, for that question. Parul, you have the next question.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Amit, I had a question about, when you said that it's very expensive for Blackstone to hire people because all 20 people from the team have to be taken to the campus so they agree with the candidate. Do you think it would make your job easier if colleges actually flew down the candidates to Blackstone's office?
Yeah, that's how we do, but it's also not fair for the candidate because for that guy or that person to come, he or she to fly all the way, have that mental stress, and then it may come at the cost of sacrificing any other interview or any other preparation. We are in no rush. We are no. There is a degree of immodesty, but we do think that if we float an opening, people would come, right? And we don't want to be. And we're nowhere to lose. It's not a. I remember negotiating at 11:30 at night whether I join McKinsey or I join BCG. We don't have that issue. Let people figure out where they want to take their first offer, and when the life is a bit more settled for everybody, in an open market we can go and we hardly have to hire one or two people. More often than not one, not two. So in a running campus life, I think it's a lot of distraction. I remember we were asked to, three of us went to Goldman final interview to London. And I think it was a very bad decision. And obviously the campus does not have that much bargaining power. And we had to play by the rules Goldman laid out. But we landed in the morning at 7 in the morning, did the interview, flew back at 4 in the morning. And that was a week when day 0 was to start over the weekend. I don't think it was a good experience. And it was, we risked quite a bit for somewhat small option value. So we don't think it's good for the candidate and therefore we don't do it.
Fair. Thanks, Amit. Thanks, Parul. Sanjay, you have the next question.
Sir, my question is related to decisions. In one of the slides, you mentioned that good decisions are linked to good judgment. I just wanted your take on bad decisions. Where does that fall into refining your judgment? Thank you.
Well, that's the mental model piece. So if you have, and everybody makes tons of bad decisions, I have a long list. That starts to give you the negative list, right? For example, I think when I meet CEO candidates, and when I start this PE role and I used to interview people, I used to give a lot of weightage for people who had lots of energy, and they spoke about things with lots of passion, and I did that and I did this. Over a period of time, I realized that, and I ended up hiring them, and they were not bad, but they were not as good, because some of the people who are extremely aggressive in these interview type setting are not necessarily as aggressive when it comes to bias for action. And somebody who you meet with a lot of calm, it's a bit like Sundar Pichai, right? If you see him or Satya Nadella, these people they don't have the Jeff Bezos aggression on day one, right? So earlier that was my mental model, but now I've actually made that mental model that's not my criteria, because you can make bad decisions just by gauging the energy of that person in the room. Now, there are certain roles. If you are running a large airline or running a large retail company, maybe that part of the trait is important. But if you're running a B2B business where you have to fundamentally do a one-on-one sale and get the customer confidence, you're fine even if the guy does not have, that 360-degree, Red Bull type energy. It's fine. So to your point, you do make bad decisions, and then you look back and say, what is that consistent thread? And then in your mental model, you either rule that variable out completely, or you say, if this is actually positive, that means, this is a non-starter. Like, for example, in a company today, when we go, if there are more than 3 family members involved, particularly finance, procurement, and the CEO, it almost is a non-starter for us, right? And that's how you then, because you've seen some mental models of how kind of it all comes together, right? And therefore you have a negative list also.
Right. Thanks, Sanjay. Thanks, Amit. Amit, I don't know if you're looking at the chat box, but we have some great reviews. People are just loving this session.
I'm not, how does it, where does it come? But anyway, that's good. As long as it's useful. I must say though, I'm happy to speak about private equity because that's what I do for my living. But this class seems to be slightly different than the other classes because whenever I've done similar stuff previously, people will talk about, how long the drinking session is to go, how are you managing those with ACADS. None of those, what is that one thing, if you did ISB again, those are the type of questions people used to ask, not too much about this PE VC, but yeah, maybe this class is particularly interested about PE and VC capital.
Right. Okay, moving on to the next question. Jevin, you have the next question. Am I pronouncing your name right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So Amit, hi. Thank you for the session. My question is specific. It's about trust. Unfortunately, at least in some instances, corporate trust has become so ironic these days. So my specific question is, if you break somebody's trust, especially in the corporate world, is there anything at all that you can do? Thanks.
Well, it's not very different from personal trust. By the way, that framework I applied, you should think about using it in your family also or your friends, right? For example, I'm not the most credible person to solve family problems because I don't even know half of them, right? But I'm a very reliable person to solve my family problems. Whenever they come, I'm at least available. I have no clue of what the answer to that family problem is. So where I'm going with that is, it's not a corporate versus personal thing. I think the best way to solve, if you end up, making a mess of a relationship, is just say it that I fucked up, or whatever, whichever way you confess. I use strong words because if you do something wrong, you should strongly confess it. Just say that I messed it up, and it was a bad judgment or an unconscious one, whatever was the state. And then you lay out one of the things which is very less valued, and I don't know what the comments which are flowing in, but at least I've heard thrice over from Shreya by now that this is one of the most honest discussions. And it doesn't take much efforts to be honest, by the way, right? It actually takes more efforts to be politically right. Just go and honestly say that, boss, I was playing for my sales or I was doing this and I lost it. The guy will at least know that the next time, right, you're not going to do that again with him, right? And it's business. It's not like, you could arguably go and mend your relationship with your ex-girlfriend if you're that candid and honest. The corporate relations are much easier to fix. I don't have any other suggestion. That's what I would do. I would just go and say, you know what, I made this mistake.
Right. Thanks, Amit. So I'm going to ask the next question from the chat box. So Atishay has asked, and this is an ISB related question, not a fun question, but somehow related to ISB. So he's asking, what were your biggest learnings about yourself or the personal growth that ISB helped you with? And do you still apply some of those in your life today?
Yeah, that's a deep question. I must say, whoever he or she is, has a great shot at consulting, because consulting is often about asking the right questions and the right answers. I think one of the things I learned at ISB was, if you go back, and there's a bit of a personal history here, but if you go back, I was I was reasonably lucky. I was the topper in my school. I was the topper at IIT. HUL treated me extremely well. I was, they had something called high potential listers. I was one of the younger ones to get there. When I came to ISB, the fact that you are in a rhythm every 6 weeks, and I don't know what the terms now are, but in our case, the terms were every 6 weeks, right? Every 6 weeks, every 3 weeks you're giving midterm, and then 6 weeks you're doing end term, and then the next midterm and the next end term. I think it's the first time I got on a sprint of succeeding, failing, and getting over with it, right? Which is what a little bit of corporate life also is all about. If you before that, I was probably on a unilateral agenda, and most of them I had a positive outcome. But here, my biggest learning was you can fail and then you just move on because there are some better things to look forward to. And that, at a personal level, I think grew me quite significantly to move on, and that's why I did well in a consulting or a private equity type setup, because here also life moves from one project to another. Even if you don't do one good deal or you miss out on a good deal, either type 1 error or type 2, whichever way, you then say, okay, what next? You're not kind of hunkering yourself down saying, oh, this is so my comfort with so-called failures dramatically improved. That this happens and you have to move on. That's one big thing. The second, I would say, at a personal level, and I kind of hinted towards it, I haven't done enough, but when I look back, uh, the humility to accept that people have very different talents and they are equally good. It's only about that situation has to come for them to perform, right? Yes, you would have gone to IIT and you scored that math, or you're that engineer or chartered accountant rank 1. And in your view of the world, somebody from a very different background may not have that experience, but that doesn't make him any less. It's about that time when, as we spoke, whether it's about trust or doing the next big thing, maybe that skill set is significantly more relevant than doing an Excel number crunching, right? At some point, judgment will become more important, and somebody who has dealt with more rookies will have a better judgment on people than somebody who's only dealt with bright people, because he will have no clue of how to deal with these rookies who have no clue about how to even contain them, right? So I think the second biggest takeaway I had was, as I said at the start, a lot of people do things sometimes, oh, I don't know how this guy is even here, right? Whenever you say that, just almost at the same time, you should say to yourself that the guy is also thinking the same thing about you, right? And you realize through the year that how super powerful and super nice those people are who you think may be a misfit to start with in your class. So that's the second big takeaway. And I think I just have so many of these friends now who I would pre ISB I won't ignore, but I don't think I was naturally leaning forward towards that fraternity, right? And some of my thickest friends are from from that club now.
Yeah. And this is timeless knowledge, guys. I think a lot of us realize the same things as you did, Amit, throughout our year. And CO21 will end up realizing these things. Cool. Sakshi Vora, you have the next question.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you, Amit, for the session. It has been really helpful. My question is along the lines of something that you said earlier. You were mentioning that considering 28-year-olds and 24-year-olds entering the industry, there was a difference between the approach. Like the 23, 24-year-olds, and I faced this myself, we were too affected by the richness of the situation and were not able to respond as we should. And considering these complex environments you've been, like ISB, consulting, and then PE, how were you able to manage a balance in your life or maintain a balance?
I think I'm going to give the most imbalanced answer of all now. I think the reality is, it is in my worldview, there is no balance. This entire notion of work-life balance or any other any other balance where there are clear trade-offs. There is no balance. The fact that there is a discussion that you need to have balance and that you need to have trade-offs tells you that one way to play this is being mediocre on everything, which is you balance out everything, right? The other way to play this is do absolutely on the ball job of what the core of the core is, right? And I think the world around you lives with it, right? Uh, we've seen across, right? I don't know if you've seen, I'm sure you guys are all home. You should see this series on Netflix called The Last Dance. It's about basketball for the people who watch it. It's a series on Michael Jordan and his full team. There were so many players who were, really, I would say, eccentric personalities who would want to go and play at the casino the night before, the NBA finals, right? And you would think that these guys are completely lost it, and there was all types of media and there is all types of skepticism and apprehension on their ability to deliver on the court, but they do. And the fact that they do it repeatedly and they became champions for 6 of the 8 years tells you that if you do your job well, the world somehow around you finds a way to live with your nuances. Look at your own family. Are you a perfect fit in that family? Absolutely not. I can tell you for all of you, right? But there is something you bring to the family. If nothing else, you bring joy, love, and life to your parents, right? That's why you're fitting there. But there's something you do so well, right, that nobody else can do. That's why you have purpose. And the day that purpose gets lost, right, even your family will throw you out. Okay, that you're done, boss. We ho gaya boss, right? And I guess that's what happens in jobs. I have never, for some reason, I've been very blessed with friends and mentors. And if you see, probably 5 years back, 6 years back, somebody asked me this question. What's that one thing which you look for in an employer? And I remember that line still. It's in an ISB interview only. I forgot which year it was. If you Google it, you'll get it. That tough situations and good people is the best way to develop, right? If you find good people around, listen to them. And don't shy from tough situations, because when you go through a tough situation, you will come out stronger. But be on the point on the core purpose. So if your core purpose at ISB is to study, I'm telling you, it will pay back. If your core purpose at McKinsey is to solve client problems, you can party hard. But if you think that you are getting this hangover which is diluting you, then just refrain from the last drink, right, or the second last drink. That's the only way. There is no rocket science in it. There is no balance. You just max out on the dimension which is the core purpose. But if you have this insane ability to, get pissed drunk and show up next morning with the best answer to the client, I'm telling you, do both. Because life is not about optimizing. Because losers optimize, winners maximize. So you maximize, but make sure that in maximizing your vector is right. Otherwise, you'll have a lot of distance covered with no displacement. For the physics lovers. So that's what I would say.
Wow, what a beautiful perspective.
That's an amazing suggestion. Thank you, Amit.
You're welcome.
Cool. Siddharth, you have the next question.
So what are some of the things that took you some time to learn in your early career, which kind of today has become like a mental model for you?
I think I just said that, to be honest with you. When there may be many more, but the one thing which definitely has helped me in this career is I really find ways to get into tough situations, to be honest with you, right? Because it's the only way to get this exposure, right? That you get into more tougher situations, because it's hardly about individuals. It's usually about problems. It takes time for people to internalize this, but the good thing about getting into these tough situations is if you don't do things well, people anyway recognize that it was very tough, boss. But if you do well, it gives you huge reinforcement in yourself, and the world around you loves you, that as if you're a uh, gift to mankind. So it's a complete win-win to play, right? But make sure when you get into these tough situations, you have some good people around to help you, guide you. And therefore, always my consideration has been, and I learned this at IIT, what phenomenal set of people those were, right? I was this middle class small town guy. Always thought that uh, there are hardly few more people who are as intelligent. When you go there, you realize that boss, you're probably bottom decile, right? And if at all there is one thing I picked out of IIT is the fact that your aspirations reset, which is the same thing which happened at ISB. The same thing happened at McKinsey, and the same thing continues to happen at Blackstone. So keep, somebody told me, it's a famous quote, I think, that you are the average of 5 people you hang around with, right? So if you kind of keep finding people who you really think are 20% or 50% better than you in at least some dimension, nobody is perfect, hang around with those people, right? And in your jobs, in your lives, try to get into tough situations. And tough does not mean dirty or politically incorrect, or the best way to think about tough situation is first make your life hectic. Okay, be like Shia and Anis, right? They could have been at home, but they have some time, so do O week. Who knows what's coming out of it? They may make few connections with alums they have organized this conference with. They may make some good friends with you guys. Tomorrow, if they do a startup, who knows? Some of you may want to work with her. Just make your life hectic to start with. That's the easiest way to dimensionalize toughness, right? I can easily be having a beer, which is my next agenda, but I'm deferring it by half an hour, 45 minutes, because who knows, right? Tomorrow, this session may help me recruit one of the better guys at Blackstone. Who knows? I'm not saying I'm coming with that objective, but so make your life tough. The tougher it is, the better it is, but ensure that there are some people, good people around you. And that's one life lesson I would leave. The second thing I would say is, maybe in hindsight again, I didn't know what I didn't know, and I was willing to punt. When I got out of 12th, as I said, my only reason to do this IIT was because my father was a clerk in a bank, and I was very clear that the only thing he can fund is a kirana shop, because of working capital kam lagta hai, and then you rotate money. Other than that, I don't think I can. He'll say with lots of love, but that's the only thing he can give me, and rightly so. I mean, that's what he could afford. So I went to IIT without knowing I'll do. I had a call from MIT to go do masters there, and I landed up at HUL to do my summers, and I loved it, running a factory, all that. So 4 years went by, I just didn't realize. Then one day, sitting there in the plant, this pixel versus picture moment hits you, saying that I'm too much in operations. Where is the big picture? Where is business? What do the CEOs do? What is profit? And then I called my friend and one of the mentors, and he said, ye sab sawal aa raha hai to go to McKinsey. So I said, how do I go to McKinsey? So they go to a business school and do well in academics. They'll find you. You don't have to find them. That's how I landed up at ISB. I topped the school and they found me. So I think the point I'm making is sometimes, you don't have to super optimize bottoms up. And I told you my story from McKinsey to Blackstone a while back. Just put your head down, do the right thing. Don't worry about, you don't know what you don't know. Other way to think about this is the movie called Slumdog Millionaire, right? Those dots only connected in hindsight. I don't think when he was distributing tea in the call center, he knew that one of the questions will come from there, right? So do the best thing when you wake up, make your life hectic, get as much exposure, make as many friends, and have to believe that these dots will connect in hindsight. I think we're getting close to the beer. It's really getting philosophical now.
Amit, I think you should know this. So Pritika from CO21 has written that most of the things being said by you can just be, put up as posters on the wall. And this is a brilliant...
Okay, I have an alternate career.
We'll take one last question and then we'll close it. Anirban, you can go next.
Yeah, hi Amit. Quick question: is there a worldview or a view that you have that you feel very few people or your peers disagree with you on? That's the first one. And the quick last one is on a lighter side: is there a reference about yourself that would have not gotten you the job at Blackstone?
So come again on the second question. I didn't get the question.
Second one is you said you were referred and you folks do 20 references for one particular role. Is there a reference about yourself that would have not gotten you the job? It's on the lighter side of the question.
No, it's a good question actually, very insightful. I think on the first one, is there a worldview I hold? Most people may not agree. I think one of the views I've come to, and maybe there are some more people who believe that this is, by the way, that question which Peter Thiel, 0 to 1 guy, asked everybody, that ask whoever you're meeting, that is there a worldview you have which others don't have. So if you're not, you should feel good that you think like Peter Thiel. But if you've stolen his question, that's also not a bad idea. I guess I think the skill of articulating a problem statement sharply is significantly undervalued in the world, right? I don't think answers matter. That's my worldview. What matters is people often, when they debate and fight it out, and when companies make mistakes, they make mistakes because they don't know what problem they're solving for. And that's one of the things I do with my companies, with people, even in my family situations, I'll keep drilling people on what exactly are you trying to solve for. And that, I think, is a very underrated, and that sharp articulation of that, I don't think exists with a lot of people on what you are really solving for. And when people articulate that well, I think they solve much bigger problems. So in a manner, maybe articulation or communication is a very underrated skill in at least in a corporate setup, even in a political setup, if you think about it, right? Because people who get that right are phenomenally successful. You look at our prime minister or a lot of national leaders across the globe. On the, I think on the references, the one reference uh, which may not have worked well for me is it's a real story actually, because it was asked of me. You know, one of the issues or one of the considerations in our industry is uh, ultimately we're capitalist, and to that extent, the the hunger to make money, right, or making sure that the wealth you're creating, you have a share of it, and therefore you also come out richer, is an important consideration because it's a tough job. You have bad days. You do have. I mean, intellectual debates are anyway part of our job. Sometimes you have heated arguments about what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And in those days, apart from your excitement of being with great peer group, etc., sometimes the commercial interests are a great anchor that, you know, I have money in the mix, so let me just hang around. You know, itna zyada emotional hone ka zarurat nahi. And I think one of the things which were asked of me was at ISB, I had, you know, more than one offer, and the offer I choose was the lowest pay, right? Which was McKinsey, by the way, just so that you can calibrate your expectations now. It's not such a great place, by the way. There are a bunch of people who pay so well. And that question was asked to me that, you know, why is that? And it was pushed very hard that does this guy, and they did some reference calls with my friends, that how much of, you know, commercial motivation is a motivation for me, or am I like this, you know, larger than life guy and a saint who is just trying to do some random things in life without taking care of himself and his family. So yeah, so that reference could have worked otherwise, where somebody did in the reference call say that you know, he left too much money on the table uh, when he chose McKinsey, and as a deal maker, you don't want to leave too much money on the table, right? So that was a bad reference.
Right. Thanks for that question, Anirban. Amit, what can I even say? You know, I just hope you read the chat box. People are calling you Elon Musk of India, and so many
Yeah,
messages
I
we
think
got
they must
regarding.
not be. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think they definitely have started on the beer. I haven't.
Everyone's just asking for the recording of this session, and they just, you know, they're saying they want to go back to it if they ever feel that they have an existential crisis incoming. So many of our friends
Sure.
from CO20 joined in this session because they heard such good
Fantastic.
reviews. So thank you so much for this. All of us thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm so glad I got the opportunity to moderate it. Thank you so much, Amit.
No, you're welcome, and I just wish good luck to the class of 2021, and, you know, folks from 2020. I'm sure you'll start early. Don't rush to join. You know, take a break. the longer it is, the better it is, because you never get it again unless you chose to do a second MBA or a PhD, as I said. So good luck. Thank you so much for a lovely audience and a patient one.
Thanks a lot, Amit. The Co20 also wants your recording. I'm getting a lot of messages asking for the recording. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
It was amazing.
Really appreciate it. Take care. Take care. Bye, guys. Good
Thank
night.
you.